The Attorney General of Arizona has already filed what I've read to be a very substantive and solid lawsuit against the Biden administration, against the government, the federal government, for these mandates. And I wanted him to come on and explain it. Attorney General Mark Bnrovich, how are you, sir?
Very good, Mark. Thank you for having me on again.
My pleasure. Tell us what you've done.
Basically, we filed a lawsuit today, the first against the Biden administration's unconstitutional COVID vaccine mandates. As you know, Mark, the Biden administration has issued an executive order, and they have said they're going to propose some rules regarding mandating vaccines that'll affect probably more than 100 million Americans. So we want to do everything we can to push back. So we filed a lawsuit today saying that this mandate is inconsistent with the Constitution. It violates the 10th Amendment. It violates traditional principles of federalism. And as you know, you've talked about in your books and on your show, the federal government has enumerated powers. It's supposed to be limited, especially the executive. And so what the Biden administration is doing is inconsistent with the Constitution. And furthermore, as a result of them systematically, in a perverse irony, saying that if you're here illegally, if you illegally cross the border of the United States, you don't have to get the vaccine, but yet American citizens are going to be required to get the vaccine. So clearly that's a violation of the Equal Protection Clause. So we think that what they are doing on its face is unconstitutional, and we shouldn't have to wait for a bunch of rules to come out that may affect businesses and impact people's livelihoods before acting.
That is a very strong point, the latter point in particular. To me, that is torpedo on the side of this federal Titanic. It really is, because if this is, as you say, an emergency, why are you imposing these draconian decisions, even apart from the 10th Amendment and so forth, on the American citizenry, and only certain American citizens, depending on where and who they work for, and yet illegal aliens and others who come across the border, you've effectively said you're not going to test them. How does that make any sense?
Well, it doesn't make any sense. And one of the things that I've talked about, Mark, is that any discussion about COVID has to begin with what's going on our border, where you have more than 2 million people that are going to legally cross this year. It's like the entire state of Delaware coming over. And yet the Biden administration doesn't care whether they have COVID or not. They're cramping them into small areas. They're putting them up in hotels in Scottsdale, Arizona. They're giving them flights all over the country. So they don't seem to care at all. And yet they allow them, the people that have entered illegally, that aren't even citizens, they protect them and their rights, but they're not protecting the rights of American citizens, hardworking taxpayers. And so it's just absurd on its face. And as you know, the Constitution clearly says that the powers not delegated to the U.S. by the Constitution are reserved to the states. And so we have to start with that premise. We know that the federal government is supposed to be a limited government, and the executive branch is supposed to execute the laws, not unilaterally create laws, and that's what they are doing. And they're doing it in a way that clearly violates the Equal Protection Clause. So whether you're a liberal, Republican, Democrat, or Republican, if you are intellectually honest, you have to say what the Biden administration is doing is unconstitutional.
Good luck with that, General. If you're a liberal Democrat, you're not going to. But let me make another point to you. And it's this: we see a lot of carve-outs here. You've pointed out the carve-out for illegal aliens. Unless this has changed, the employees of the United States Postal Service don't fall under the mandate. He met with union bosses to try and discuss with them the mandate and so forth and so on. The politics that devours the science in so many respects here seems to me, if you ever get to oral argument and that sort of thing, seems to me is quite pronounced, is it not?
Absolutely. And as we discovered in the discovery in one of our lawsuits against the Biden administration's not enforcing existing federal law over their interim guidance on not deporting people that were here illegally, and during that course of that, we found, we interviewed officials, ICE officials, and they knew what they were doing. We were endangering our community. So if we can get to discovery and we can find out what's really going on, and even during the course of that litigation, we found out that political pressure was put on the White House, and that's why they had carve-outs as to who would be deported and who wouldn't. And if you look, this is how arrogant the left is, Mark. If you look at the statements from the chief of staff and what the president's own folks and spokespeople are saying, they literally are talking about the quote-unquote ultimate workaround. So they know what they're doing is inconsistent with the Constitution, and they don't care because it's the ultimate arrogance and it's the ultimate hubris. And that's why it's so dangerous when you have this concentration of power in D.C. because if you're one of the favored classes, if you're one of the postal unions, if you're one of these favored groups, there's one set of rules for you and there's one set of rules for people, the hardworking taxpayers, and it's just not right. And that's why I said that earlier about joining together, because really, we all need to fight this, because once you cede this kind of arbitrary power to D.C., or that the president can act like King George and do whatever he wants, we're never going to get it back as the people. And that's why you got to fight these battles now. And as you said, this is just the first torpedo in the water. There will be other lawsuits, especially if they actually try to promulgate any of these rules.
And Attorney General, it's always believed for some reason that the acts of centralized government are so noble and so reasoned. And I'm sure you've looked at the U.S. Supreme Court, the history. You have the Jacobson case, but you have a subsequent case about 20 years later where the court ruled that the forced sterilization of what they called idiot women was, in fact, a power that the federal government could exercise. And they sterilized 60 or so thousand women against their will or without their consent. And so we have a court. We could talk about Plessy. We could talk about all kinds of decisions that have come out of the Supreme Court, some good, some bad, some irrelevant. And the idea that we would continue to support the centralization of this kind of power because we believe the central government is so noble defies the facts, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And, you refer to the Jacobson case, and let's not forget that that was a case involving the scope of police power of a state. I think even 100 years ago, or the framers of our Constitution understood that the federal government does not exercise police powers when it comes to public health, safety, welfare. Those were issues that were supposed to be left to the states. Obviously, if you read Federalist 45, 51, they understood that. And furthermore, to do the Justice Holmes' famous, opinion in the sterilization case about, I think he said 3 generations are enough. That's the problem that the left, the progressives, don't understand. They believe that there's these enlightened people that can tell us how to live our lives, and if only the experts, right? The experts are in charge, then everything will be fine. It's kind of that Marxist notion that if only you get the right people in charge, that's how society flourishes. And it's fundamentally wrong, but it's also unconstitutional. And the genius of our framers was they understood that there's a need to have these checks and balances, not only amongst the executive, legislative, and judicial branches, but also the states for the ultimate check. And we need to zealously guard our authority as states. We need to uphold federalism. And quite frankly, what Biden is doing is dumb, and all 50 states should agree.
And of course they won't. Now, I don't know what your plans are. Do you have a few minutes to wait after the break? I have a few more questions for you.
Sure, absolutely.
All right, I'm on with the really outstanding Attorney General of Arizona, Attorney General Brnovich, who I've endorsed in the Republican primary for the United States Senate as well. And my question when I come back is this. You really highlighted or crystallized a very important point. The president has a lot of authority when it comes to immigration and securing the border. He has no authority to do what he's doing with small businesses or large businesses. And yet when it comes to his actual authority on immigration, that's where he decides to take a pass, where he doesn't seek to enforce the vaccine. We'll explore that further with the Attorney General of Arizona. Attorney General Mark Bnrovich, who has brought the first case challenging the Biden mandates. And I don't believe a president of the United States has ever done this before. Has he, General? Has one?
I think that what the Biden administration is doing, frankly, is unprecedented. I can't think of any other instance where you've had this kind of overreach. And, I know you know this stuff very well, Mark, but in the Obamacare case, one of the arguments was made during that case as well, under the Commerce Clause authority, can Congress pass this law? And even Justice Roberts said, this Commerce Clause stuff's going too far. They don't have that kind of authority. And that's why he used that pretzel logic and saved it by using the tax provisions. So I think that the notion that even Congress can't pass a law requiring you to buy insurance. So how is it that the executive, without any legislative approval or authority, can require you to inject something in your body against your will? I mean, it really is crazy when you think about it in that terms. Take it out of, all the stuff, the debates about COVID and the science and everything else, but just this notion that the federal government, the Department of Justice, whoever it is going to literally destroy you if you don't inject something in your body. It's just really really a radical notion that undermines not only traditional notions of federalism, but this notion that government is here designed to protect our rights, not infringe on our individual liberty. It really is radical.
And yet the media are all in with this guy. It's unbelievable. The media just do not believe in liberty, and they don't believe in reasonableness or a balance. If it comes on from on high, from Fauci or the massive bureaucracy in Washington, D.C., they're all in. I'll give you an example. There was a reporter from the New York Times that was on MSNBC, and she said she's spoken to legal experts anonymously, so we don't get to know who they are, of course. And she says that they've all said the administration is a very, very strong case, and they said especially with OSHA, because, you know, OSHA, as an example, she says, if there's a toxin in a workplace, OSHA has the power to make sure people don't get sick from that toxin. Well, if you have people who are not vaccinated, who may be carrying the virus, government has a right not to have to ensure that those people won't make you sick. And right off the top of my head, General, I thought to myself, no, wait a minute. What kind of comparison is it? If there's a toxin in the workplace, obviously the owner of the workplace has to remove the toxin. He doesn't start sticking needles in everybody's arms, does he? Or fire them if they don't accept them?
Well, I think that's part of the problem the Biden administration is going to have once they promulgate rules, is really these are going to be capricious and arbitrary. And I hate to even say this, Mark, but, you know, this line where they drew it at 100 employees, well, why 100 if you really care about public health? So I think that eventually what is going to happen is they're going to mandate this for everyone. If you get any sort of government benefit, and this, of course, is the fundamental problem when the government gets so too big, when it has its fingers in education, healthcare, all these other issues, it then has that power because it controls you economically and financially, and then they can mandate these things. And that's why we have to push back and restore the constitutional order. And it is, I guess, the second thing to kind of preview where this is going next. I'll tell you right now, there's a lot of jurisprudence. You mentioned these terrible cases in the past, you know, Korematsu, Plessy, you know, where the court got it wrong. I will tell you what, at some point we need to litigate what the constitutionality of these certain OSHA requirements, and has there been an unconstitutional delegation of Congress of legislative authority to agencies like OSHA? You know, you have these federal agencies now that are run amok, and it's about time we check that. And so, you know, there's a lot of lawsuits I'm involved in, you know, on the border. We have that lawsuit against Yellen where we sued the Biden administration over the COVID bill that says states can't cut taxes, which, you know, once again, is clearly contrary to the 9th and 10th Amendments. So there are a lot of issues we need to be vigilant about, pushing back against the federal government. And you know, Mark, the reason why I'm running for the U.S. Senate, besides being an AG, is because my job is to go to D.C. and not make Washington, D.C. more efficient. It's to make it smaller. We need to start dramatically reducing the size and scope of the federal government in our lives, not trying to make it better, more efficient. That's what the left does. That's what, you know, folks that are trying to, you know, feed the alligator and hope he eats you last do.
Well, let me tell you something. You've been bringing very, very important lawsuits. I hope some of the other states will follow suit. I suspect they will. And, you know, the governor of Nebraska mentioned that they have these weekly discussions with the White House and the governors. And the only guy who's never present is Joe Biden. He's never present. So he lashes out against these governors, and he doesn't even talk to them.
Well, his earpiece probably doesn't work on the phone. He gets that static, you know, Mark. So it's tough to, you know, when the folks that are speaking his earpiece when he's on the phone. So that's probably why. But I'll tell you what, look, you know, folks can always go to markb4az.com. You know, we had to change that a little bit because Andy thought Brno for AZ was too common.
Well, you've got a lot of consonants in your name.
Yeah, well, you know, we couldn't afford vowels when we immigrated to the country. You know, that's the way it goes. So brnoforaz.com is the website if people want to find out more of what I'm doing. Need all the help I can get.
All right. Well, we wish you all the best, sir, and we'll have you back for sure. Take care of yourself.
Thank you, brother. Thanks.